Okay, so now we have to ask the scary question. Are carbs making you fat? Are carbs the enemy, and are they causing you to gain weight and gain fat, or at very least making it a struggle to lose weight and stubborn body fat? Now, what happens when carbohydrates are digested? I think it's really important to give you a scientific breakdown of exactly what's going on with your body, how it responds to carbohydrates, and what it does with broken down carbohydrates. So, when carbohydrates like sugars and starches are being digested, they get broken down by the body into their simplest form, rather, which is glucose. That glucose, which is a sugar, so keep that in mind, passes through the small intestine and into the bloodstream, and this is what raises your blood sugar. So your pancreas, as a response to that rise in blood sugar, starts creating insulin. The insulin in your bloodstream opens the doors to the cells in your body, and essentially your body will do two things when those sugars enter your cells. They'll either try to use them for energy immediately, those cells in your body will, or you'll end up storing those sugars and calories as glycogen and fat. And that's where things get a little hairy. So here's what you need to know about blood sugar and its relationship to body fat and your body fat percentage is that research has shown that eating high glycemic foods jack up your blood sugar rapidly. Unless you're planning on working out before or immediately after you eat some high glycemic foods, your body won't be able to use all of that sugar in your bloodstream at once. So if you're not active and you're eating these high glycemic foods, when your body produces insulin and opens up the gateways to your cells, that energy is going to be converted to fat and stored glycogen as opposed to muscle or being used in your bloodstream to perform some kind of work or activity. So like we just discussed, your body is going to have to rapidly store those sugars as glycogen in the muscle or liver, or as fat, which is what you don't want, in order to get your blood sugar back to equilibrium, because that's what your body's goal is in producing that insulin, is bringing your blood sugar levels back to normal. So it has to do something with all those sugars and all those calories. So what does that mean for your body? As I said before, research has shown that there is a positive direct correlation between high glycemic diets and fat gain, weight gain, and an increase in waist size. So those are the places that you do not want to go. Basically, the more high glycemic foods you eat, the more weight and fat you will gain, and the more snug your clothes are going to fit. So like I said, not the place you want to be. So here's a really interesting question. So we talked about carbohydrates, we talked about the glycemic index and how foods match up on the glycemic index. But what about things like proteins and fats on the glycemic index? And here's what's really interesting. Since the proteins in foods like meat and eggs are in such high demand for necessary functions in the body, as we discussed before, and since they are naturally low in sugar, they barely even register as a blip on your body's blood sugar rate. Now, keep in mind, that's for most proteins. They're naturally slow burning and digest slowly so that your body can use them for necessary functions, like I said, as we mentioned before, instead of storing those calories as fat or glycogen. So now we can just bring this all back to our myth busting that we started out with and ask the question again, so are carbs making me fat? And my answer is yes and no. It depends on what kinds of carbohydrates you're eating. As we discussed, vegetables and fruits are considered carbohydrates just as much as things like pasta and macaroni and noodles and rice are. So if your diet consists of a moderate to high amount of high glycemic carbohydrates, that's most likely the reason you're gaining weight and body fat. At very least, that may be the reason you are having trouble losing weight and trimming the fat around your waistline. These foods spike your blood sugar, trigger a higher insulin response, and cause your body to store those unused calories and sugars as fat and glycogen. So just to reiterate and kind of bring back what we've talked about so far, low glycemic carbohydrates like vegetables, fruits, and even 100% whole grain products digest slower than their high glycemic counterparts. They won't spike your blood sugar or insulin as dramatically or as badly, which means that you will get the chance to use those sugars for work or exercise before they get stored as glycogen or fat. And if you're exercising while you're doing this, your cells can convert that to muscle tissue to help your muscles rebuild and repair after your workouts. So just to put this all together for you, if your goal is to lose weight and lose body fat, make sure that the majority of your carbohydrates are coming from low glycemic foods. And if you're in question about this, you can always look up the glycemic index of foods on Google if you aren't sure. Most of them will stand out to you because they'll have a higher amount of sugars. If you read the food labels on a lot of the food that you're eating, or if you're unsure about the labeling on a food, you can always look that up online. I use Google a lot for doing that for calories, sugars, carbohydrates, and the glycemic index too. Keep in mind also, the more you can get your carbohydrates from real food like vegetables and fruits, and the lower your total sugar intake is overall, the better your results will be. There is a positive linkage, there's a strong linkage actually, to the amount of sugar in your diet versus the amount of body fat and visceral fat that you have. So one thing I would recommend in moving forward is that you should start tracking everything that you eat and drink. And MyFitnessPal or one of the other great free applications or websites out there that you can use to track your food and your calorie intake. And the reason I love these so much is because it's totally free. It only takes me about 5 minutes per day. I think on a long day, it might take 7 or 8 minutes to track everything. And they give some great charts and graphs for breaking down your macronutrients and then other things like sugars, the total amount of calories you've eaten. It'll give you calorie goals based on your current weight and goal weight. So I would highly recommend to start tracking in either MyFitnessPal or Lose It's another great one, or some other great application. I'll go ahead and add the link for that in the notes to this presentation.